Hello, everyone. Don't know if anybody can hear me yet. I'm going to keep talking just in case people can, because otherwise I just look kind of stupid sitting here not doing anything, right? So I can't see myself yet. So I never know if anybody can see me on these things when I can't see myself yet. There we go. Now I'm getting ready to appear. Okay. So I'm going to wait for some people to get here before I go into the technique itself, right? Because otherwise it ends up being stopping, starting, stopping, starting. So say hello for a bit to those of you who are appearing and who are the faithful who are always here immediately every time I start. It's nice because I'm beginning to see some names who are popping up here over and over again every time I come on. But we're just going to wait for a few people to get here before I go into this particular technique. All right. I will share something with all of you aside from hello. So hello to everybody who's saying hello. This is a technique, but it is, I guess what I'm wanting to say is you have to add a few more factors to this technique in order to make it perfect. Because really there are a lot of subtleties that I do not have time to really go into, because this is something that I'm going to be teaching on the relationship course. And it would take a really long time to teach every single aspect of it. So I'm going to give you the basics of it, and I'm going to take you through an example chart on how to do it. But let's just wait for people to get here and see who all's here. Somebody's asking if I'm online. I am online. I hope I'm online, at least. Let's wait for a few more people. While we're waiting for people to get here, anybody have any general questions they want to ask while we're waiting for a few more people to arrive? Okay, now everybody keeps doing this. Every single time we have this, everybody goes, I can't hear you, right? And then everybody else says, I can hear you. So try to refresh your browser, right? And if everybody else is having a hard time, basically refresh your browser, okay? If you can't hear me still, please let me know. So if some people can let me know they can hear me, those of you who can hear me, say, I can hear you. Or don't say it because I won't really hear you, but if you type it on the screen, then I'll get the idea, okay? And so while I'm waiting for people to say they can hear me and everything is okay, just kind of sit tight for a minute or two. And we're getting enough people here that we should be able to start talking before much longer, right? So let's, I'm still waiting for somebody to say they can hear me, right? Is there anybody who cannot hear me? Great, you can hear now. Excellent. General rule for counting forward or backward in Rashis for Jaimini techniques, not odd or even, but which techniques? There are several different ones. Basically, if you're counting Argala, you don't want to count forward or backward. If you're looking to see somebody's skills or somebody's relationship, then you can count forward and backward, right? But there's an entire list of them. So I'm not going to go into that here, okay? As a matter of fact, we have enough people here that I am going to do two things here. And I may do this a couple of times, right? First of all, I am going to type something very special in the chat window before we get going. This is for all of you who appear here every week. And then we're going to get going with going into the technique itself, okay? So I'm getting ready to type something into the chat window for all of you who are here. Right, so if I'm quiet, that's kind of why I'm quiet, okay? If I can make it work, there we go. Sometimes I can't spell so good. That's why I'm being quiet. I know it's boring. I'm just typing something in the chat window for everybody. Something very special. There we go. There's something that I have typed in the chat window for all of you who are here. Okay, and I may do it later on too. But for now, let's get into this particular technique. And let's talk about that. So first of all, this is a technique that is from my Approaching mini course that is on how to predict relationships and how to predict marriage in a horoscope. This course starts this Sunday. I wanted to do a mini course because I wanted to do a course that I could make seem affordable to a larger number of people. Because you see, my larger courses, I end up having to charge more because they're much more of a commitment of time, right? So I figured I'd do a mini course. And for those of you who really want to take courses with me, then you would have an opportunity to do so. So this course is going to be on how to predict relationships and marriage. And it's going to be a 4-week course. It's $129. It starts this Sunday. If you want to register for the course, I do recommend registering soon. The thing that I popped up on the window, in the chat window, that does not count for the course. It's just for consultations, right? But for the course itself, it's $129. It's a 4-week course. This is one of the things we're going to teach on the course that I'm going to show you today. Only I'm going to show you the general technique of it. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is the concept of how important Avasthas are in terms of being able to predict things. And Avasthas are equally one of the most neglected aspects of Vedic astrology these days. But, you know, Parashara writes about them in Brihat Parashara Horashastra. So certainly they're meant to be applied. And if you know how to use them, you can get some really good things from them. As a matter of fact, they are like the cornerstone of my prediction techniques. I use them to predict pretty much everything. So we're going to go over these today. And I'm also going to take you through an example chart, and an example chart of a date where somebody got married. And we can see how important all these factors are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a document for everybody, if I may, here in just a second. But first of all, I have to make sure everybody can see it. And let's see, there we go. Okay, right, is there anybody who cannot see what is on the screen? Right, I'll wait for somebody to say something before I start talking, because sometimes I know things don't always pop up, so I'm just wanting to make sure the text document that I'm sharing is on the screen. So just a simple few words, we can see it, would be helpful. Okay, I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and start talking about it because I know that there are people, it takes people a little bit of time to kind of type things in the window sometimes, but I may, okay, I can make the font size bigger, so that lets me know people can see it. Good, right. Let me go into the document and let's do that. But I'm going to read it off to everybody anyway. Okay, so this is what we've got. This is from the chapter in Brihat Parashara Horashastra on bhava considerations, and it's from the stanzas 14 to 16. Everybody tends to have different translations of Brihat Parashara Horashastra, so it may be worded a bit differently, but this is how vital this is. So Shubha conjunction, or aspect, or the Lord aspecting or joining. Also that Lord being Yuva, which means adult. Prabuddha, which means awake. That's similar to one of the Jagradati Avasthas that's called Jagrat. standing in the royal place, so that means a planet in the 10th equal house, or Kumara, which means youthful. These circumstances indicate a well-faring bhava, say the wise. So when the Lord is Yuva, Prabuddha, or Kumara, or when the Lord of that house is standing in the 10th, or when there is a Shubha conjunction or aspect, or the Lord of the house that that planet is in is aspecting or joining, that creates a well-faring bhava. That of which the bhava Lord is Nashta, which basically means combust, joined with the trick Lord, meaning the 6th, the 8th, or the 12th, etc., not aspecting or joining the bhava, meaning the Lord of that bhava is not joining or aspecting the bhava. If the bhava Lord is Shupta, which is the same as Sushupti, which means asleep. If the Lord is Vrita, which means old, or Mrita, which means dead, or if it's Padita, which means pressed, which is basically planetary war. The effects of the bhava are said to be surely lost. That means that there are problems with that bhava. Now, in those instances, when the Lord is Sushupti or Supta, Vrita or Mrita or Padita, sometimes things can actually still happen in terms of the considerations of that bhava, but they have a tendency to fall apart. But when the Lord is Yuva, when it's Jagrat, when it's standing in the royal place, now that's, or Kumara, then things tend to be able to manifest through that bhava. But if a planet, say, is Kumara and it's equally Sushupti or Shupta, or if it's Yuva and Sushupti, I should say, right? Because it's just different ways of saying the same word. Then that can also be problematic, okay? But this is just a general way to predict things. I'm going to go into more of the subtleties on my relationship course. This bottom bit here, we don't really need to go into. All right? So basically what we're looking for in terms of things being created are that the Lord is Yuva, Prabuddha, standing in the 10th house, or Kumara, right? That's a general way of looking at things. That means things can be created. If it ends up being Sushupti, or Vrita, or Mrita, or if it's in planetary war, or if it's combust, then that can be problematic too. Now, I'm not going to go into how to find out if a planet is Sushupti, Vrita, or Mrita, because basically most astrological software these days will do that for you. It should, okay? So it should do that for you. So what I'm going to do before I go into anything else is I'm just going to look and make sure everybody doesn't have some weird questions about that, okay? And let's go into my chat window. Let's see what we've got on the screen. Okay, and just a reminder, because some of you are asking, so this is a technique that you can predict relationships or marriage, but we're going to do a marriage technique today. And basically, this is from my Approaching Many course that starts this Sunday. Okay, you can find information about it basically on my website. You can look under the courses tab on my website. I'll also put a link in this video for those of you who are watching this later on. Okay. So that's what this is about. Okay, so we're going to go into a chart. And I did a video several days ago where we looked for the potential for marriage. So we're going to run through that particular technique too. Okay? All right. So let me bring the chart up on the screen. And sorry, it always takes a minute. I have to admit that I don't do Google Hangouts that often, so it kind of gets a bit difficult for me. And let's choose the chart. And before I get talking on things, does anybody have any problems seeing that? If you could type in your chat window if you have any problems, that would be absolutely great. Okay, I'll just wait a second or so to see if anybody has any problem seeing that. Okay, good. So here is what we're going to do. Basically, we want to see, first of all, if this person even has a potential to get married. Okay? So what we're going to do in order to do that, oh, actually, I should go back to that other screen because most everybody likes to have the north and the south up. We're going to find something called the Upapada. Okay? And the way you find the Upapada, and this is a Jaimini technique, and I will say beforehand, because I had a lot of people typing stuff in my last video about the 12th house, there are so many different translations of Jaimini sutras. I have found this particular method of finding the Upapada from the translation that I work with to be more accurate. I recognize it may be different than how some of you learned it. This isn't me denying anybody's learning or somebody who taught them this, that, or the other thing. I have respect for every single teacher. I can only share the way that I learned it, okay? So what we do, I do a lot of work with house cusps. So we find the 10th cusp, okay, which is over here in Aquarius. Or if you're looking over here, I'll point out over here for everybody. It's over here, okay? And I don't even know if you can see my pointer. So what we do is we find where Saturn is from Aquarius. It's in the 2nd from Aquarius. And so then we find the 2nd from Saturn, and that will be our Upapada, okay, which is in Aries. So then we look at the 7th from the Upapada, and we see what planets are in it. Well, you've got Venus there, and a good solid Venus. And we want to see who's Rashi aspecting. You've got Mercury Rashi aspecting. All Somya or benefic planets. That's pretty good. So then we want to go and look at the Saptamsha in order to see the same thing. And we look at Libra again. So then we see the Sun Rashi aspecting here. We see Rahu Rashi aspecting. And we see Ketu Rashi aspecting, and we only see one gentle planet. So this lets us know that this individual is going to have some problems with relationships. It doesn't tell us they're not going to get married, right? But it says that there can be problems with relationships. We'll go look at the Shasti Amsha too, but unless you have rectified the person's birth time, or unless it's a birth time you can really trust, you don't want to go into the Shasti Amsha. But we'll assume this birth time is okay. All right, so basically the 10th cusp here in the Shasti Amsha is in Cancer. The moon is in the 9th. We look at the 9th from the moon here, and that is in Scorpio. We find the 7th from Scorpio, and that is Taurus, where you have Mars. And we'll see Saturn Rashi aspecting and the Sun Rashi aspecting. So that's pretty harsh too. And this individual did have a lot of problems with relationships. Okay, but that's a preliminary technique that you do too, to see, first of all, you want to save yourself the time of going in and trying to predict marriage if the person doesn't even stand a chance of getting married at all. Okay, now this next bit is key. Basically what I'm doing is I'm using a technique that, and this will be taught on the course, that combines Jaimini techniques along with Vimshottari Dasha or Parashara techniques. It combines the two, right? And if you remember with our text document, it said something in regard to a Shubha being conjunct or aspect, or the Lord aspecting or joining, okay? So we're going to use Rashi aspects for that. And in terms of a Shubha joining or aspecting, there are specific things that we're going to look for. We're going to look for a waxing moon. We're going to look for Venus, and we're going to look for Mercury, and we're going to look for Jupiter, because those are all what are considered Shubha planets. Now, if it's a waning moon, that's a different story, because waning moon doesn't help things to grow. It makes things decay. Unless it's there with another good, solid, gentle planet, right? Then the waning moon can be okay. But in terms of waxing moon, here we see a waxing moon, and it's conjuncting the 7th, right? And so this person actually got married in their moon dasha. So here we can see the moon conjuncting the 7th. Okay, I made some notes for myself too. Let me just kind of grab it, if I may. There we go. And when we look for Mars, Mars in this individual's chart is the Dara Karaka. Okay, and we can see this Dara Karaka is in its own house, right? When you're looking for Karakas using Jaimini techniques, you just want to look at the dignity of it to see if it's strong enough. You don't have to go into whether it is Yuva or Kumara or any of that. You just want to see primarily if it's in its own house, right? So Mars as the Karaka is strong. It's solid. Okay, so that's good. This person got married on, just bear with me for a moment while I extend this. Moon, Mars, Mars, Venus. They got married the 3rd of September, 1995. All right. So basically, we want to look at all these planets and look at how they can contribute to creating marriage in the horoscope. Well, we see the moon here conjuncting the 7th, right? In addition to that, that's pretty much it because this was a man's chart. So when we look for Mars, aside from Mars being the Dara Karaka, Mars also has a special function as per Jaimini astrology, which is when you have a strong Mars, and by strong Mars, I really mean a Mars that's in its own house, that's Mula Trikona, or is exalted, or perhaps in a great friend sign, right? If it's in a great friend sign or above, that planet Rashi aspecting something can create a hunger towards something to the extent that the individual manifests it or makes it happen through sheer force of will. So aside from Mars being the Dara Karaka, Mars is also Rashi aspecting the 9th cusp here. The 9th cusp is really the marriage cusp. 7th house is relationships, but 9th house is relationships we're committed to, relationships that are long-term, relationships that have a purpose, and relationships that are legally binding. So the 9th house is very important in terms of relationships. So we see this strong Mars creating a growing hunger towards that 9th cusp. And then when we bring Venus into the equation, well, Venus here is basically Venus. It's the natural karaka for relationships for men. But both the moon and Venus also share another function, pardon me, in regard to analyzing this. So with the moon, first of all, let's look at this moon. We're looking at it in the Rashi chart. Notice this moon is Mrita, right? So I'm going to point something out to you. If we remember, we said that if a planet is Mrita, the indications of that house are lost. Okay, so that's the Rashi chart, though. Interestingly enough, the person got married, and we'll see why when we look at the Navamsa chart. All right, and one of the reasons why is aside from this moon having another function, it's also growing the relationship cusp. But the moon is also the 9th Rashi Lord from Mars, 12th, 11th, 10th, 9th, okay? So it has a 9th house function because it's the 9th Lord from Mars. When you look at Venus, Venus rules the 7th from Mars. It also has a relationship function, okay? So all of these planets have good, solid relationship agenda. But because of the moon, we can see the moon here is in the 7th house too, so that creates some focus from that. We're not going to go into a lot of the subtleties, like this relationship likely required some sacrifices on the individual's part, etc. That's shown by Mars being in the 12th from the moon and Venus being in the 12th from Mars, etc. Those are just some background things, but we'll learn things like that on the course too. Let's go and look at the Navamsa. And let's see what case we can find in the Navamsa chart for this individual getting married at that time. Okay? So remember, this moon was Mrita in the Rashi chart. In your Navamsa chart, this moon is Kumara. It's youthful. Okay? So it has the capacity to create something if it has a relationship agenda. And it does, because it rules the ninth cusp. It's the ninth cusp lord. All right. So that's pretty meaningful. Let's see if the moon's doing anything else. It's Rashi aspecting the seventh cusp, so it's growing relationships. It's also Rashi aspecting its own house. Remember, we said something about that. We said if the planet is Rashi aspecting its own house, then it creates what's called a well-faring bhava, as per Parashara. Okay, so now let's look at Mars. Well, we see one very important thing here. First of all, Mars is the Darakaraka. Mars is neutral here, and Mars can still create things as the Darakaraka, but Mars isn't quite as vibrant here. But Mars is also in this particular position Bala. Now, nothing is said about Bala in that thing that I did with about the Parashara techniques. But if a planet is Bala, if it has another planet assisting it, then it can create something, okay? But it can't do it all by itself. So for instance, if this individual was in Mars Dasha, they probably wouldn't get married, which they didn't, I don't think, okay? Or they may have, I don't know. I don't know much about any remarriages of this person in the Mars Dasha. But here we'll notice that Mars, if you can see the Jagradati Avasthas, it's Sushupti, which is the same as Shupta. So we see that there are some problems with this particular relationship. They can get married, but it might fall apart later on, okay? Interestingly enough, though, and this is something you always want to look for, the moon here is in Mars's sign. So when you see periods when the Antardasha Lord is in the Mahadasha Lord sign, or the Mahadasha Lord is in the Antardasha Lord sign, or the Pratyantardasha Lord is in the Antardasha Lord sign, or the Antardasha Lord is in the Pratyantardasha Lord, and so on and so forth all the way down. When you see cases like that, those can be pretty important. Those mark very important periods, right? So it's no wonder or surprise that this was an important period in regard to marriage. So then we want to look at Venus. Here we have an exalted Venus, right? This is a really solid Venus. And we always want to look at the position of planets from their superior dasha lord. So we looked at Mars's, you can look at Mars's position from the moon. It's the 11th. The marriage would have taken some planning, so we can see some of the details associated with this. Now we're looking at Venus's position from Mars. Having planets in angle from each other when it's a dasha, sub-dasha period can be very beneficial. But equally, Venus rules the ninth for Mars, which is that relationship house, okay? So basically, we see Yuva planets. We see a Bala planet here too. We see a Kumara planet. This Mars lets us know that there can be some relationship, there can potentially be some relationship problems further on down the line. But we're just looking at how we can create relationships here. Okay, so that really basically is the technique. There are some subtleties that you need to know. I'm going to be teaching those subtleties on my course, which again starts this coming Sunday. Let's see. Let's see what, if anybody has anything to say in response to what I put up. Anybody have any questions? So I will wait here. So just while I'm waiting, you know, I'll kind of chit chat and say the course starts this Sunday. Basically, it's $129 for the course, which lasts 4 weeks, right? And it may go an extra 5th week too, because I want to make sure we cover all of the syllabus on the course. So it's going to be 4, potentially 5 weeks. Each class is going to be an hour-and-a-half long. If you register for the course, you end up getting a recording of each class so you can go back and watch it. You'll have access to the PowerPoint documents that I use in class, right? If you want to watch that as well. All of these things you'll have access to. Plus, you will get access to my Vedic astrology forum. So you can ask questions in between classes if you have any particular questions. And you'll see a link either further down the page on this video or in the video itself. Okay? Some of you are asking some questions about specific things. We cannot really, so somebody's asking a question, what happens, Darakaraka Mars is conjunct Ketu and Venus in Leo? Well, we really need to look at the Navamsa for that. We need to look at the Saptamsa for that. We need to look at the well-being of all those factors. There's so many things to take into consideration, and just showing you what I just showed you, that's why I tend to steer away from going into the generalizations, because there are so many subtle factors that really determine that. And equally, just as Samir is saying, it depends on the dasha that's running. So somebody asked something about Pushkar Navamshas. I don't really do much work with Pushkar Navamshas. I understand it's about a planet occupying a specific degree, but I don't really work with that technique that much, because I tend to use the Baladi Avasthas and the Jagradati Avasthas, which begin to show you a lot of the same things. And so that's why I tend to not go into it. So, you know, I will admit it's not something that I work with, so I don't really want to go into speaking on it right now, because I've hardly ever worked with it or had experience with it. Okay. All right. Oh, and by the way, it's not just Jaimini dashas. And so these techniques that I'm teaching are using Vimshotri dasha with Jaimini techniques. It's combining those two concepts. So Rashi aspects, understanding how planets function in Jaimini dashas, or in Jaimini astrology, and using Vimshotri dasha. And it works like a charm. Absolutely wonderful technique. Okay. So if anybody has any questions about things that I've shared just here, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, I am going to type something again in the chat window for all of you who have come here today. Right, and there we go. But this is just for consultations, okay? So that's open to everybody here who is watching. It should be in your chat window there in a little bit. And that's going to be valid for a little bit of time. I haven't decided how long, a day or two maybe, okay? All right. But it's kind of a thank you for all of you watching and coming to all these live events. I really appreciate it. Okay, nobody has any other questions on what I have shared. And so I will say a fond, could I please elaborate on the scope of this particular video? Well, I just shared a technique, a general technique on how to predict basically relationships or marriage. We used a marriage technique, and this is from an upcoming course that I'm starting this Sunday. Okay. All right. So I hope that helped to answer your question. And you can find information about that course on my website, AuthenticAstrology.com. Click on the courses tab, look for predicting relationships in marriage. All right. Thanks everybody for coming, and I will talk to everybody the next time that I am on. Take care of yourself. Bye now.